It's been a real privilege to be part of the Reading Passport project. It's enabled me to introduce my own work, my own enthusiasms, to talk about the field of horror to which I contribute. I'm representing the world of darkness as I am a writer of supernatural horror. My own favourite writers within the field of horror really were, I suppose, the first writers I encountered, particularly from the Edwardian period, the ghost story writers like M.R. James, the mystic writer Arthur Machen from Wales, Algernon Blackwood, Walter Delamere, Wakefield, so that Oliver Onions, the classic period right through to the moderns like Robert Aikman and Ramsey Campbell. So really I read widely within the whole wheelhouse of horror. But those authors I encountered when I was younger and that my own father read to me always retain the most special place and still continue to be inspirations. My latest book is called No One Gets Out Alive. It's a novel of supernatural horror. If I was to pitch it as a film, I would pitch it as 15 ghosts, 4 serial killers, and something much worse in the basement. It's my first true ghost story in which I've tried to authentically capture the experience of a haunting based on a composite of actual hauntings, people who have seen or think they've seen apparitions. I suppose with all books as well, I try and make them a commentary of something that's going on in my own time, in my own world, and this is a novel very much about the horror of poverty and the horror of being young and disenfranchised and coming from a difficult background and struggling to get a start in life. My next project is quite a unique project, at least for me, in which I've combined horror with near-future science fiction. And it's a novel really about 3 of my own personal fears, my biggest fears. The first one is the loss of a child. The second theme in the book is runaway climate change. And the third is the steady collapse of civilization into barbarism. I'll read from the very first chapter, a few paragraphs from the opening, in which the lead character, she's down on her luck, she's working temp contracts, 0 hours contracts, she had a difficult home life, she's young, and she rents a room in what turns out to be the wrong house. So it begins in the middle of the night when the character wakes up, disoriented in the dark. The dream receded quickly, and Stephanie recalled little of it, beside an anxious desire to leave a cold, greyish place, a narrow space in which people stood too close to her. One of them had been crying. Into the unsettling moments trailing the end of sleep came a relief that only her panic lingered from the nightmare. The respite was twinned with a sense of loss for something important, yet indefinable and left incomplete. And she was cold. Where her head poked out of the duvet, it stiffened, as though her bed had been placed outside of the building. Stephanie's eyes were open. She was lying on her back and could see nothing above, but inside the darkness was a voice, a muffled, continuous voice surrounding her waking thoughts. Not a single word was loud or clear enough to be understood, but she was horribly certain the muttering could not be part of the dream, because she was fully awake. There was no urgency to the voice, or particular emphasis, or even emotion. The tone suggested monotony, a monologue. The voice issued from the side of the room near the fireplace that she couldn't make out in the dark. Even with the lights off, and not even an ambient glimmer peeked around the thick curtains. A radio in another room. Though the more she considered the voice, the greater was her impression that someone was speaking behind the wall on the other side of the room. But there was nothing on the other side because the house was detached, so perhaps a television was switched on in the room below her own, and the sound was travelling up through the chimney. When the voice in the fireplace began sobbing, Stephanie felt like joining in. It was a strange kind of broadcast that allowed one person to speak continuously before breaking down on air. could be another tenant. In a nearby room, someone might have been talking to themselves and was now crying. The sound of genuine anguish introduced a picture into Stephanie's mind of a woman kneeling on the floor beside an open fireplace, clutching her face. She could not go and ask after them. She disliked herself for feeling embarrassed by another's distress, but it was the middle of her first night in the house, and she wasn't confident enough to offer that kind of gesture to a stranger. But thank God it's only a neighbour. For a moment I thought... The tension returned to her body and her mind so quickly and with such force that she sucked in her breath as if she'd stepped into cold water, because no radio or television or heartbroken tenant could possibly account for the scratching that began beneath her bed.